Good evening. You're watching Infowars Nightly News. I'm David Ortiz. It's Monday, the 18th of February of 2013, and here are our top stories. Well, it seems that New York City is starting an initiative that could be very concerning and could spread like wildfire throughout the nation. According to an article posted on the New York Post, the headline reads, "Scoop the Nuts Mentally Ill Roundup Plan After Train Pushes." Essentially what the article says is that recently there have been a couple of mentally ill individuals who have pushed people on subway platforms into trains, and as a result, they don't want an epidemic starting, so they're going to make sure that all mentally ill individuals take their medication. If an informant, a family member, comes to them, the Department of Health, and says, hey, listen, my loved one is not taking their medication, they're now going to demand that they take it, and if they cannot find that individual, they're going to use high-tech technology to track them down and make sure they take their medication. Now, while this may sound lighthearted and it may sound like it makes a lot of sense, could this start a disturbing trend where, local law enforcement officials demand that you take your medication, your vaccines, and if you don't, they will track you down using GPS technology, chip technology. It could really start a disturbing trend. And like typical liberals, only a couple of train pushes occurred with mentally ill individuals, but that's all they need to propose draconian legislation. Just a couple of people getting hurt, like you see with assault weapons, for liberals in New York City to propose draconian legislation. According to Department of Health officials, before, they would just, if a family member said, my loved one who's mentally ill is not taking their medication, they would just go to their home address and try to make them do it. But if they were off the grid, they couldn't do anything about it. So it doesn't matter if you're off the grid now, local government officials are coming after you. And we now know that we live in a world with vaccinations. In the state of New Jersey, they're proposing legislation, and in states nationwide where it's going to be extremely difficult for you to opt out of vaccine programs, your kids. So could this be starting a precedent? And they're saying that they're doing this because they don't want to be held liable, the city, if one of those people goes off the rails and hurts someone. And a Department of Health individual for New York City says they're just trying to get these people help. How loving. So could local law enforcement authorities be coming after you if you don't take their vaccines? New York City is always great at beta testing the nanny state. Now, speaking of tyranny and other news, the Chief of Police in Chicago is demonizing Second Amendment supporters. This is truly amazing. According to an article posted on WashingtonTimes.com, the Chief of Police, Gary McCarthy of Chicago, says, this is according to the Illinois State Rifle Association that's quoted in the article. He was conducting an interview, Gary F. McCarthy, the Chief of Police of Chicago, and he said that firearm owners who lobby their representatives or who donate money to political campaigns for Second Amendment issues are guilty of corruption and of endangering public safety. It's truly amazing. These gun grabbers continue, and that individual, McCarthy, he used to be the Chief of Police in Newark. He tried these little gun buyback programs, and they didn't work. They didn't work. So now he's spreading his cancerous ideology to the city of Chicago, and that cancerous ideology is spreading throughout the country. These gun grabbers don't start. Their argument was always, we're only going after the assault weapons. Remember that? And now they're really demonizing you. They're saying that if you donate money to political campaigns of staunch Second Amendment supporters, not of assault weapon supporters, staunch Second Amendment supporters, you're bad. It was Piers Morgan a couple of weeks ago who said his ultimate goal is for no Americans to have any guns. He wishes that no Americans could have any guns. Mayor Michael Bloomberg, when asked by Piers Morgan, do you think Americans have the right to bear arms? What did Mayor Michael Bloomberg say? Well, it doesn't matter what I think. The courts have ruled that Americans have the right to bear arms. Translation, of course I don't think these peasants should have arms. But the Supreme Court tells me I'm tyrannical. State Supreme Courts tell me I'm tyrannical. So I have no power in the matter. I have to abide by these laws. And for those that say, David, we're only after your assault weapons, we don't mind if you protect yourself in your home. It's important to note that in 13 U.S. states, you cannot conceal carry. There was actually legislation in New York State that was proposed so that homeowners could only have one bullet in their magazine. One bullet in their magazine. So their goal is to disarm the American people. That is their goal, but they're using the assault weapons argument to get that accomplished. Now, speaking of an attack on the Second Amendment, it seems that Washington State is also proposing a bill that will seek to criminalize gun ownership. That's why it's so important that we not only keep our eyes on what Dianne Frankenstein is doing, but that we keep on our eyes on our states, because we could celebrate a victory if the federal assault weapons ban doesn't pass. But, you know, don't jump for joy because your state might pass an assault weapons ban, or your county. You have to stay on these criminals. According to The New American, the article headline reads, Washington state senators seek to criminalize gun ownership. And Bill SB 5737 defines assault weapons as follows. Any semi-automatic pistol or semi-automatic or pump-action rifle or shotgun that is capable of accepting a detachable magazine with a capacity to accept more than 10 rounds of ammunition, and that also possesses any of the following. If the firearm is a rifle or shotgun, a pistol grip located rear or the trigger. If the firearm is a rifle or shotgun, a stock in any configuration, including but not limited to a thumbhole stock, a folding stock, or a telescoping stock that allows the bearer of the firearm to grasp the firearm with the trigger hand, such that the web of the trigger hand between the thumb and forefinger can be placed below the top of the external portion of the trigger during firing. If the firearm is a pistol, a shoulder stock of any type or configuration, including but not limited to a folding stock or a telescoping stock. It just goes on and on. And from what I understand, in recently, the state of Oregon is proposing a bill to make sure that police officers go into every homeowner's home annually, at least once a year, to make sure they don't have assault weapons. So the information... Olympia, Washington is the legislator proposing that. So we have to keep an eye on these individuals. They do want your guns. Their argument is assault weapons, but it's all incremental. And for those who don't forget, only about 1% of Americans, less than 1% of Americans, are victims of gunshots. And at least 60% of that 1%, less than 1%, has to do with suicides and the drug war. And a lot of people always watch Infowars and say, what can I do? What can I do? I don't have access to my legislator. I don't have money. What can I do? Well, here you go. This Saturday, there's going to be a rally nationwide called National Day of Resistance. If you want more information, it's called dayofresistance.com. You can get some more information. I don't know about this organization, but I do know about this march. An estimated 50,000 people in more than 30 states have already agreed to hold marches. There's going to be about 100 local rallies with the resistance movement aimed at unifying patriotic Americans from across the political spectrum behind the U.S. Constitution and gun rights. So there you go, dayofresistance.com, and you can rally, I believe it's this Saturday, and let your legislators know you're not having it. We know this is all incremental, and you say it's assault weapons as if that wasn't horrible enough, but it's going to lead to smaller guns. And remember, the Second Amendment is not about hunting children. It's about it's a doomsday provision. If the government becomes tyrannical on the American people, we can defend ourselves. We always need to be one up on the military. And speaking of the military, on Infowars.com and how they're, arming to the teeth, there was an article posted that the headline reads, Feds buy 2 billion rounds of ammunition. And basically, it's upping what Alex and Paul Joseph Watson recently said. They said it was about 1.6 billion rounds of ammunition that was purchased by federal authorities. It's now up to 10 billion rounds of ammunition that's been purchased by federal authorities. And basically the article talks about how even neocons, staunch neocons like Michael Savage and Mark Levin, are siding with Alex. The federal government has said, their spokespeople, that this report is overblown, and the reason why they're getting so much ammunition is for training sessions. But, Alex has said he doesn't believe it, as Paul Joseph Watson doesn't believe it. And according to Mark Levin, the neocon, we don't agree with a lot of his political beliefs, but we do agree with his love of the Second Amendment. He says in the article, "I'll tell you what I think they're simulating: the collapse of our financial system, the collapse of our society, and the potential for widespread violence, looting, killing in the streets, because that's what happens when an economy collapses. I suspect that just in case our fiscal situation, our monetary situation collapses, and following it, the civil society collapses, that is the rule of law. They want to be prepared. I know why the government's arming up. It's not because there's going to be an insurrection. It's because our society is unraveling." So Mark Levin, a big neocon, as well as Michael Savage, are defending this report, which Alex and Paul Joseph Watson posted, that our government is arming to the teeth, and we don't believe that it's just for training sessions. Now, in our final piece, it seems in good news, Rand Paul, senator out of Kentucky, is proposing legislation that will allow industrial hemp to be grown here in the United States, so that there could be a lot of hemp businesses. And also similar bills are being proposed right now in the state of Kentucky, as well as in the state of Washington. According to Senator Rand Paul, marijuana is made up of 20% THC, whereas industrial hemp plants contain less than 0.3%. And industrial hemp, it's the same botanical family as marijuana, but you can't get high on industrial hemp. There's a lot of industries that can be created, a lot of businesses that can be created if we allow industrial hemp to be grown here in the United States. We import it. Why in the world can't we grow it? And there's, right now we're importing it. That stuff can be grown here in the United States, create a lot of jobs. And some of the things that can be created as a result of hemp is paper, cosmetic, lotions, auto parts, clothes, cattle feed, and so much more. There's actually a business, the senator says, called Magic Soaps in California, and they gross about $50 million annually, and they're importing all of their hemp. It's truly a shame, because those jobs could be created here in the United States. So we hope that bill passes. We're now going to go to our daily quote, and it's from none other than Albert Einstein, a man who knew a thing or two. And this is what he said: "Learn from yesterday, live for today, hope for tomorrow. The important thing is not to stop questioning." Again, learn from yesterday, live for today, hope for tomorrow. The important thing is not to stop questioning. And in just 1 minute, we're going to go to an interview that I conducted earlier today with libertarian-leaning legend broadcaster Larry Elder. Larry Elder, we're going to talk about the Second Amendment, the attack on the Second Amendment, the issue of fatherlessness in the African-American community. So hold on tight for that interview.
Infowars.com is proud to introduce the new Infowars skateboards by Alien Workshop. Skaters have always been against the grain socially. Now wake up your friends politically. Just go to InfowarsStore.com. We have divide and conquer or brainwashing. Then take your deck to your local skate shop, pick out your own trucks, your own wheels, and then hit the streets and wake some people up. Here is legendary skateboarder Jake Nunn.
This one has a lot more concave than I have on my board, and I like concave. It makes it easier to turn and feel the board. Looks pretty cool. I mean, it's almost the same shape as mine. It's not really a sport, and it's not really art. It's just kind of freedom, I've listened to Alex Jones for a long time, and I love what Infowars does. I've always loved Alien Workshop, too. I think it's kind of cool you guys got together. This one's pretty nice. Definitely one for the wall, one for the collection. Also good to skate.
Get these limited edition decks at InfowarsStore.com.
This is Jake Nunn. Get these beautiful new skateboards at Infowars.com. Alien Workshop collaboration. Good stuff.
Alex Jones here with a message that could revolutionize health in this country. Going back about 1.5 years ago, I began to learn about the incredible health effects of longevity products. Aaron Dykes lost 92 pounds. We're going to show you some before and afters. Aaron, break down what happened, your story.
I've worked really hard with diet and exercise to try to lose weight, but I just didn't get the results. It just didn't happen. Then I saw what you were doing with InfowarsTeam.com. I wasn't even trying to lose weight, but I got it because I wanted to feel better energy. I wanted that nutrition. Didn't even understand how that could kickstart my own weight loss goals, but the products did that for me. I found myself suddenly losing weight, more energetic, wanting to exercise, wanting to eat the right foods.
And they don't even advertise it as weight loss. I want to challenge our radio listeners to go to InfoWarsTeam.com, sign up as a distributor, and get wholesale pricing discounts at InfoWarsTeam.com.
Welcome back. We are now joined by legendary radio host Larry Elder. We're going to talk a little bit about the state of the Second Amendment, race politics, specifically among the Democratic Party, and his new book that he has written that addresses the issue of fatherlessness. Larry Elder, welcome to Infowars Nightly News.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Now, Larry, I have to admit, full disclosure, I am an El Dorado.
As 7 billion other people on this planet ought to be.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, an El Dorado is kind of like saying a ditto head for Rush Limbaugh fans, you know, someone who's been listening to Larry. And one reason why I always found you to be so insightful and fascinating is because you're a minority, such as myself, who never really understood this continual talk about racism amongst our community. I always thought that racism was very over-exaggerated. You know, but from what I know, many people in the Hispanic community and in the black community don't seem to get over this issue. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I just think it's over-exaggerated. Your thoughts on that?
Well, of course it's over-exaggerated. I mean, this country has come a long, long way since slavery, since Jim Crow, since the modern civil rights movement. For crying out loud, we've got a black president of the United States. We've had back-to-back black secretaries of state. Arguably, the most famous person on the planet is Tiger Woods, if not Barack Obama. The entertainment industry is dominated by people like Tyler Perry and Oprah Winfrey. For crying out loud, most blacks are well above middle class. If blacks were a separate country, we would be the 15th or 16th wealthiest country in the world. I'm not saying that things are perfect. Things will never be perfect. 10% of the American people believe Elvis is still alive, for crying out loud. 8% believe if you send him a letter, he will get it. You're always going to have idiots. But can somebody who gets an education, who got drive and energy, make it irrespective of his race, color, creed, or sexual orientation in 2013 in America? Hell yeah. That's why most of the 7 billion people on this planet want to come here.
Yeah, I mean, this political correctness on the left, I mean, what do you think about the thoughts now that there are illegal immigrants coming into Congress saying, please don't call me illegal immigrant, it dehumanizes me?
Well, the Democratic Party is all about making sure that they continue their power base. If the 12 million or so people that they want to make citizens would vote, 3/4 of them Republican, would we be having this conversation? Of course we wouldn't. This is all about maximizing their power. And until and unless the borders are secured, more than that, until and unless we figure out a way of making sure that 50% of the people who enter the country legally but overstay their visas are tracked down, there's no reason to have this discussion. And what the Democrats want to do, of course, is to have the discussion holistically, meaning they're not going to secure the borders. We're going to have the same problem 20 or 30 years down the road, and then we'll welcome another group of Democrats to the country. That's what this is all about.
Now, tell us a little bit about, you know, the history of the Democratic Party's, their record on civil rights as opposed to the Republican Party's history on civil rights. Now, I'm not saying we like neoconservatism here. That's bad. Just the history on civil rights. It seems to me that the black community, they're almost like political masochists. They keep running to this party that historically has been so bad to them.
Well, understand that most people in this country, especially most black people, get their education in government schools, K through 12. They're taught by government teachers who give this revisionist / brainwash history of the respective parties. The Democratic Party is the party of racism. The first successful Republican candidate to win the presidency was Abraham Lincoln. The Republican Party was founded over the ashes of the Whig Party precisely to stop the spread of slavery and ultimately to push for its abolition. It was the Democratic Party that voted unanimously, often against the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, the amendments to automatically free blacks, to give them the right to vote, to make them newly citizens. Democrats voted against these things often unanimously. Democrats founded the Ku Klux Klan, for crying out loud. The Klan used to be called the terror wing of the Democratic Party. And as a percentage of the parties, more Republicans voted for the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 than did Democrats. What you're going to hear is a lot of people telling kids that the Republican Party really was the party of racism because all these racist Democrats in the South left the Democratic Party and joined the Republican Party. As I mentioned, the Republican Party, more as a percentage of the party, voted for the Civil Rights Act than Democrats. If you're trying to leave a party to join a racist party, why would you join the party whose members voted for the act that you hated, that caused you to leave the other party, and who voted for that in a greater percentage than the people that you left? It doesn't make any sense. And people like Howard Baker, one of the first people to leave the Democratic Party and join the Republican Party, he was an integrationist. He believed in getting rid of desegregation, getting rid of segregation. So the fact is that the history has been distorted, and for some reason, most people, especially black people, believe the Democratic Party wears the white hat, Republican Party wears the black hat in the area of civil rights A and B. They believe that because of Jesse Jackson and Maxine Waters and the left media and academia and Hollywood, they believe that racism remains this huge problem in America, and but for the Democratic Party to stand up there with a sword and a shield, Lord knows where us poor black people would be. That's the mantra, that's the narrative that the Democratic Party has pushed, and unfortunately many black people have bought.
Now, there are many people that are going to say, "Oh, come on, Larry, that was decades ago." But as of right now, the Democratic Party, they're more our friends. Explain to people listening, what contemporary accomplishments have the Republican parties had? Has the Republican Party had?
Well, I'll tell you this. We were talking the other day, I was on the Piers Morgan show, we were talking about gun violence. And I said to Piers, look, if you're really serious about gun violence in America, the face of gun violence in America is not some suburban kid in a place like Newtown. In fact, a kid is more likely to be struck by lightning than be killed in a school shooting. The face of gun violence in America is that 15-year-old girl who performed at Obama's administration who was killed. The face of gun violence in America is a 6-year-old Latina girl who was on a porch in Chicago one March last year when she was one of 5 people in 1 hour killed in Chicago. 500 people were killed that year in Chicago, and they're on track for 600 this year. That's 2 Sandy Hooks per month, and most of these murders are by blacks, and the blacks are usually victims. About 70% in a city that's only about a third black. The murder victims are black, and the murderers are black people. And so you have to ask yourself what's going on here. Unless you're prepared to say that black people are just genetically inclined to commit more crime than whites, you have to ask yourself what's going on. And the answer is lack of fathers in the house. In 1965, when Lyndon Johnson launched this so-called war on poverty, 25% of black kids were born outside of wedlock. That number now is 75%. 35% of white kids are born outside of wedlock. The number in the Hispanic community is almost 50%. And there's a direct relationship between not having a father in the home and you name the social ill, whether it's dropouts, whether it's becoming a member of welfare, whether it's unemployment, whether it's just gun homicides. And don't listen to people like the Heritage Foundation and people like Charles Murray. These are neocons. You can dismiss them. What about people like that well-known neocon Tupac Shakur, who in that documentary Resurrection talked about being raised without a dad? And he said, I know for a fact if I had had a father in my life, I would have had some discipline. I would have been more confident. And he went on to do an expose about how a mother can't raise a father that sounded like Jerry Falwell. So kids in the inner city are telling you what's going on. They may not know why, but they know the what, and the what is absence of fathers. And what we've done is we rewarded people into behaving slovenly by giving women financial incentives, whether it's food stamps, whether it's public housing, whether it's daycare vouchers, whether it's women, infant, and children money, and we're allowing the men to abandon their moral and financial responsibility. Bill Cosby calls such men unwed fathers.
Right. And, what can the Republican Party do to increase their support among the black community? I mean, it seems like I think it's 5% right now.
Tell the truth. Talk about what I just now talked about. Most people don't realize, if you look at the census reports from 1890 to 1940, and this covers the period of the Great Depression when 50% of black adults were unemployed, blacks were slightly more likely to marry than whites, which meant their kids were more likely slightly to be born in a nuclear intact family than a white family. What's happened? What's happened is we've incentivized bad behavior with the best of intentions. Democrats have done this, and many Republicans have sat silently and applauded or even participated invested in this. And what we've done is we've destabilized families all across the country, and we've seen the social ills as a result. And rather than look at themselves in the mirror and say, good Lord, for 50 years, I've advocated the wrong thing, what do? They talk about racism, they talk about poverty, they talk about semi-automatic weapons, they talk about global warming, you name it, anything but the fact that they've, for 50 years, have supported policies that have hurt this country.
But Larry, the Republicans, and look, I'm not a neocon, but the Republicans have told, on the issue of civil rights at least, the truth, and it just falls on deaf ears. I mean, don't they have to do more than just tell the truth? Do they have to roll up their sleeves and go into the inner city possibly?
Well, did you hear Mitt Romney say it during the 3 debates he had, when he had people's attention without the filter of ABC, NBC, CBS, and the left-wing media and Hollywood and academia? These are the opportunities where Republicans had a chance to say what I just now said. Romney didn't come close to saying what I just now said about what's happened to the nuclear intact family as a result of the welfare state. He didn't come close to talking about the damage done whenever you hike minimum wage, which is what Obama wants to do, at $9. He didn't come close to giving people a lecture about the history of the Democratic Party. Most people don't realize that the Klan was founded by Democrats. Romney had a chance to say it and blew it.
Now, speaking about fatherlessness and, you know, the ripping apart of the family, you wrote a book recently called Dear Father, Dear Son, 2 Lives, 8 Hours, that talks a little bit about this issue of fatherlessness, people who are bitter towards their dads. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the reason I wrote the book is because I wanted to write something that would talk about the importance of fathers. And I figured the best way of doing it, so I wouldn't bore people with numbers and graphs, is talk about my own dad. I couldn't stand the SOB growing up. And it took me a long time to realize that my father's gruffness that I interpreted for lack of love was just his way. I didn't find out until I was 25 years old. The book is called Dear Father, Dear Son, 2 Lives, 8 Hours. And the reason it's called 2 Lives, 8 Hours is because when I was 25 years old, after not speaking to him for 10 years, I sat down and I figured we'd have a 10-minute conversation. The conversation lasted 8 hours. And during that period of time, he morphed from this mean SOB to this kind, caring guy whose gruffness I completely misunderstood for lack of love. So the book really is a 247-page apology to a man who was always there, always in my life. He was never abusive. He was just gruff and tough. He was a Marine, a Montford Point Marine, a black Marine. He was the first black Marine, one of the first black Marines. They're the equivalent of the Tuskegee Airmen. The guy didn't know his biological father. The name Elder was the name of a boyfriend who was in his mother's life the longest. He was an alcoholic who was physically abusive. My dad came home from work one day at the age of 13, had a fight with the mother's then boyfriend, a different boyfriend from Elder. The mother sides with the boyfriend, throws my father out of the house, never to return. We're talking about a black kid, Athens, Georgia, a year or two before the beginning of the Great Depression in the Jim Crow South. And my dad still never hated the world, never hated the country, always believed hard work wins, and told my brothers and me that the world had changed dramatically from the time he grew up, and there are no excuses now.
Okay. And the issue of fatherlessness, how can this be, you know, resolved? I mean, I recently heard Barack Obama in a State of the Union speech talking about universal pre-K. He never talks about fatherlessness. He basically says, you know, we need more government involvement. We need government to buy your children braces, government, you know, for education. Now let's have universal pre-K, when in fact the problem is fatherlessness. What can people, how can we make the situation better?
Well, the good news is we know it works because we've seen it work. In 1996, when Bill Clinton, over the objection of people on the left part of his party, signed the Welfare Reform Act, welfare declined by 50%, far steeper than even the most optimistic projections. Why? A whole bunch of able-bodied and able-minded people, more than we even thought, were sitting on the couch collecting their check, and once we told them that there are going to be time limits, and from now on, when you have additional children, you didn't get additional money, they got off the couch and went to work. We need to continue that. Welfare ought to be done at the state and local level by nonprofits, by churches, by individuals who know you and can give you advice that is more likely to change your behavior. That kind of welfare is far more efficient, by the way, than government welfare, which wastes a lot of money. I volunteered one time when I was working for a big law firm for a whole summer for United Way, and I was amazed at how much more efficient it is in government. You donate $1 to an organization like that, about 95 cents of the dollar gets down to the intended beneficiary. Give $1 to the government, and about 70 cents is burned up in transfer costs. So apart from anything else, it's more efficient to have welfare done at that level and far more likely to change behavior. So in the short run, we need to far more money, the charitable money for organizations that do things in the inner city. For every person that's killed, there's a big brother or big sister who might have turned somebody's life around, and we need to donate money for that. And long term, we need to stop giving people money at the federal level, no questions asked, this free welfare, because we've seen what it does to destabilize families.
Now, Larry, we've got 90 seconds left. Tell us a little bit about, speaking of contemporary issues, your opinion on the attack on the Second Amendment that we see going on right now.
Well, the purpose of the Second Amendment, of course, is to guard tyranny against government. And for people that laugh about that, I wrote an article where I posted some of the things that were said about George W. Bush, including things by George Soros, who likened the Bush administration to the Nazi regime. Al Gore referred to the FCC as going after people who say things that the government doesn't like, and liken them to digital brown shirts. So I'm just collected a whole bunch of statements made by the left suggesting that tyranny is just around the corner. So either the people who made those kinds of statements suggesting that George W. Bush was a tyrant were lying, or they sincerely believe the possibility exists. Either way, that's what the Second Amendment is for, and the people on the left just don't appreciate why we have the Second Amendment. If the Second Amendment is not there, the others can't be enforced.
Well, Larry, thank you so much for your time. Again, the name of your book, Dear Father, Dear Son, 2 Lives, 8 Hours. It's a great read. Continue your great work.
My pleasure.
Well, that's all for this edition of Infowars Nightly News. And remember, if you want to continue supporting our operation, become a member of PrisonPlanet.tv. For less than $6 a month, you can get access to this nightly news telecast in high def every night. You can get a lot of content, access to Alex's documentaries in high def, and you can share your username and password with up to 9 other people. So it's a great way to spread the message, or you can just get a couple buddies to just chip in a couple bucks each, and the membership will be $2 a month. So again, PrisonPlanet.tv. That's all for this edition of Infowars Nightly News. We'll see you again tomorrow evening.